about boundaries. And I love talking about boundaries because they affect everything that we do. So we can think about this in so many ways, right? We can think about boundaries across all areas of our life, but I like to think of it really, I mean, first and foremost in my mind, boundaries are an integral part of self-care, and the two are symbiotic because we cannot have one without the other, obviously. And it's about knowing where we start and where everything, like where we start and finish and where everything else starts and finishes. I think, I mean, you know that I talk predominantly to women because my client base is predominantly women. So forgive the sweeping statements, but I do like to kind of keep it simple and generalise. And the fact is that the overwhelming majority of women do the overwhelming majority of childcare, domestic care, everything for the family. If they've got children, organising all the children's events and after school clubs and childcare and packed lunches, and then at home doing all the laundry, doing all of the organising, doing all of the shopping if you've got extended family or parents that you need to care for. Just a lot of it falls to the women most of the time, okay? Not all of the time, I absolutely understand that, most of the time. And so blurred boundaries is a massive issue for so many women. And when we think about, well, I like to kind of have a triangle in my mind. We think about work and we think about family and relationships, and then we think about self. It's like everything goes to either work or family/home life, and there's often so little left for ourselves in the main, okay? So understanding the importance of boundaries and really being able to put these in place is essential, because we can't have this conversation. We can't talk about boundaries without talking about burnout, because the burnout is the natural consequence of not having any boundaries. Now, granted, boundaries look like so many different things, and we can think about relationships, we can think about work, we can think about family members, we can think about work-life balance, diet, alcohol, exercise. Like, there are so many areas that we can think about this. But actually, if we consider it in terms of actually just self-care, what do I need to do to look after myself? What do I need to do to be the best version of me? Because here's what I know is true for myself and for so many of my friends and family and clients, is that when we are looking after ourselves and when we are the best version of ourselves, we do everything else so much better. So I know that the guilt that comes with saying no, the guilt that comes with creating personal space, time out, like whatever, wherever you find your guilt, actually we end up caring better for those that we love. We end up doing a better job for our clients, for our managers, whatever, when we are looking after ourselves. That is a fact. Okay, so even though I might feel guilty saying to the kids that I can't do X, Y, or Z because I'm going off to do this, I'm going off to have an afternoon or an evening with my friend, as because mummy needs a little bit of time for herself. Might not make somebody else feel guilty, makes me feel fairly guilty, to be honest with you. But I know that when I do that, I come back so much brighter. I come back better, a better version of me. So let's have a think about a few ways in which we can implement said boundaries. I've got a long list. I mean, I'm probably not going to go through them all, but I'll do my best. The first one is actually just learning to say no, and I think this in itself is a whole topic, because learning to say no for some is incredibly difficult, and we can think there about what it means to let somebody else down. Does that mean I'm being selfish? Does that mean I'm people pleasing if I'm saying yes when really I want to say no? Does it mean that they might like me any less? Do I feel selfish? Do I feel guilty? Like all of these things about saying no, when actually the important thing to bear in mind is that when we are saying yes to something that we would rather have said no to, we are actually saying no to ourselves. So we're actually putting somebody else's needs above our own. And we're also enabling them, because if this is somebody who is repeatedly asking us to do something, or is taking advantage, or is lacking respect, or actually just pushing boundaries, then we are enabling them to do so by always saying yes. And that doesn't have to be a big deal. That could just be your husband not pulling his weight around the house and you always doing it for a quiet life, right? I think a lot of us can relate to that if we're really, really honest, or something similar, something thereabouts. And actually it's important sometimes to just say, no, actually you really do need to do that, and kind of stand your ground, because then the benefit of that is then setting the tone then for saying this is not something that I'm always going to be doing, and you need to be preparing yourself for doing it instead. So you need to find a way to make that work, because I'm not going to always be here to say yes all the time, whatever that may be. I was talking to somebody about their 17-year-old daughter always getting a lift rather than getting a bus. And so that was, that was a conversation that we were having, in exactly the same vein around boundaries, and whether or not she was doing the 17-year-old a favour by always taking her everywhere. And I mean like everywhere, not like sometimes, I mean like all the time. And what was right and fair and balanced about that situation. Okay, so just another example. But needing to say no when you want to say no. Sometimes we don't get to say no. Sometimes we have to do some things that even if we don't really want to. But there's always an opportunity. There's usually an opportunity to say no to some things. And then we come to speaking feelings, and then we come to, communication, which is, I love talking about communication, because communication should be one of the easiest things in the world to do, and yet so many people really, really struggle with it. So just making sure that you are you're speaking about what's going on. If there are feelings that are coming up for you around boundaries, personal space, self-care, like whatever the issue, respect, whatever the issue is, then talk about it. And if you don't want to do something, you don't have to be apologetic. You might need to explain what is going on. You might need to express your feelings. When we talk about boundaries in relationships, communication is out of all of the couple work I've ever done, and I don't work with couples anymore, but out of all of the couple work that I've ever done, it was always about communication. Like 9 times out of 10, the difficulties that were being had were always about communication. So talk more, like own your feelings and own your right to be heard. Own your right to share your feelings in a way that makes you feel like you matter and makes you matter to your partner. More often than not, partners have not got a clue what's going on. I mean, maybe they should, and that works both ways. That's not a sexist comment. Like that works both ways. Most of the time, partners actually aren't that clued into what you're thinking and feeling, even if you think they are. So speak up is the moral of that story. So delegating and like respect, kind of, they're not quite two sides of the same coin, but they can go together. They do in my head go together. You know, if you feel like you are always, we're going back to kind of like being the yes person again. If you are always the person that is doing all of the things, and I speak from experience as somebody who does a lot of the things, sometimes it feels like it's easier to just do it than it is to delegate. But actually, it's so important to delegate. And then when we do delegate, and you know, all of these things that we're talking about here, we're talking about empowerment. Because when we learn to set boundaries, when we learn to say no, when we learn to delegate, when we learn to do all of these things, speak our emotions, speak our feelings, actually what we're doing ultimately is we're empowering ourselves. That's what boundaries are about. Boundaries are about self-care, but they're also about empowerment. And what we want to do is we want to empower ourselves, but we also want to empower those around us. So I'm always very mindful. I've talked about this so much in the past. I'm always very mindful about what are our children learning from us. And our children, you know, if you're like, regardless of whether you're in a relationship or not, if you have children, they are learning everything from you. So what are you teaching them around saying no, around delegating, around self-care, around speaking your emotions? Like, I'm always very mindful that I've got two little people that are absorbing everything that I do and say. And so I want to make sure that I am teaching them. I'm not going to teach them perfectly because I'm human and we're all human and we all make mistakes. Like, it's not about raising perfect human beings or being a perfect parent, but it is about being mindful and being conscious and being very deliberate in the lessons that I want them to learn. And so when we're talking about all of these things, I'm always doing it within the context also of what am I teaching them. And I know as I'm saying it, I'm running through all of the things in my head about the ways that I could be doing it better, all of the ways that I do a lot of things for them for a quiet life. So, like, you know, it isn't about being perfect. I never put myself on a pedestal and say that I get it right all of the time. But I think also having an awareness of these things is also really, really important and can be really, really helpful for doing it better in the future. And then the last one that I want to talk about is around negative energy, and really when we think about other people. And this is a really important one to me because this comes up in conversation very often with my clients. And that is about being aware of negative energy in our close circle. So whether that is your partner, unfortunately, that happens quite often, your friendships, your family, your work environment, being very aware of people who have a negative energy, who drain you, who make you doubt yourself, who make you feel exhausted. Like, be really, really, really aware of these people. Like, we also want to be really aware of the people that lift us up and champion us and support us and make us feel great and all of the really good things. But it's actually really important to be aware of those that don't do that. And the likelihood is that you have somebody in your network that is an energy drain on you or is a toxic energy. And if you cannot eliminate that person from your network, then just be very, very aware of that energy and put a boundary around your personal space where that person is concerned, because that energy, that person, they will be draining you, and not just energetically draining you, but have you questioning your ability, your worthiness, your value, and nobody should be doing that. Okay, so there we are. I hope that has been helpful. I do really enjoy talking about boundaries. I would love to get your feedback. If you have any questions or comments, please do let me know. And if you would like to know more about working with me one-to-one, drop me a DM. Or if you've got anything that you want to raise from any of the issues that have come up in this session, then just drop me a DM, and we'll either have a chat via message or book in a time to speak. Okay, all right, brilliant. Have a lovely rest of day, have a lovely rest of week, and I will catch up with you soon.